Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Matt, Cryptic if you prefer, and today we're going to talk about something that I have been pretty heavily requested to talk about. Back at the beginning of 2024, I wanted to find new ways to make my workflow faster and to make some of the aspects of what I do a little bit more tolerable. So one of the things I chose to do was to look at an application called Rizom UV. If you're not familiar with Rizom UV, it is a purpose-built application for UV unwrapping and management. I tried Rizom a long time ago, but I didn't really understand it. I didn't really enjoy the workflow with it, but after trying it again over this past year, I can fully say that it is one of the fastest ways that I have found to go through and unwrap your objects. And so today we're going to do a little getting started tutorial for people who are jumping into Rizom for the first time. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on that. Okay, so we're starting off in Maya because that's just how this whole process starts. So you've built your model in Maya, Blender, whatever you've actually built your model in, we need to export it. So I've got this kind of ugly basic slash not basic object, and we're gonna just take this and export it now. So the first thing we wanna do, go ahead and just clear everything. And then aside from that, there's not much else we need to do. If you want to, go ahead and name it. We'll just call this one ugly. Why not? We're going to go File, Export Selection. I'm going to put this on my desktop, and we're just going to call this ugly_Rizom. You want to make sure you are exporting as an FBX or an OBJ. I usually use FBX just because I can take that from Rizom directly into Substance Painter if I want to. So we'll go ahead and export selection now. So let's go ahead and fire up Rizom. So Rizom can be pretty daunting when you open it up the first time. It's a little bit stressful. There's a lot going on, but it's actually really simple. So we're gonna go to Files. We're gonna go Load. You can load with or without UVs. I always choose to load without UVs just because I'm going fresh with this. So let's go ahead and import Ugly Rizom, and we have it. So here we are. The movement inside of Rizom is basically the exact same as Maya. Your pan, tilt, rotate controls are all the same. The only thing you'll find that's a little bit different is your transform controls. So what do we do here? So you can see that on your UV tile window here, that we have just kind of a flat representation of our object, but we can't really do anything with it. And then here we have our normal object. So we need to decide how it is we want to unwrap this. If you're familiar with UV unwrapping, and this video kind of relies on a little bit of experience with UV unwrapping, you need to be able to look at your object and say, okay, so this is where I'm going to put my seams. So the question is how do we go about selecting our seams? So you have your selection tools over here. You have your vertex selection, you have your edge selection, you have your face selection, and you have your object selection. Rizom handles this a little bit differently because if you hover over this, you'll see that this is not just an object selection, it's your islands and groups selection tool. So basically when you cut this up, it's going to select individual islands. And I'll show you how to work with that in a minute here, because Rizom itself doesn't really have a way to select the object entirely unless there are no UVs in existence. So the first thing we want to do is we want to load in a checker map, and you can go up here and you can select, you can just do your basic one if you want to, and you're noticing nothing changed. It's because there's no UVs on this yet. So let's go ahead and we're going to do a user. From here, what I like to do is I just go and import my own. So I'll go down to my texture library, go to my UV, and I'll just import my own UV grid. Again, nothing's going to change here because we don't have anything. So let's go ahead and unwrap the first section. So how do we want to do this? So I'm looking at these nubs at the top here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my edge selection, select that, and I'm going to find the closest to the body that I can cut. I could cut down here, but this is going to create a really ugly seam, so I'm going to just try to cut it close enough to the base of this actual object. And then I'm going to go up here and look at how I want to split this. So I want to split this up the side, but I want this to just unfold like a little cross. So what we'll do is we will control click the top one. Control clicking the top one allows you to hold the selection at the bottom, and then you can control double click the bottom line or the line underneath the one that you selected, and it will actually travel through and it will stop at your last selection point. So go ahead and do the same thing across your model. Just click, control click, click, control click, and click, control click. So that's some of the basics of like selecting in Rizom. There's also some other ways we can do this. So if I actually do Control Z, I will go backwards. Say I want to select that without dealing with where to plan. So what I can do is I can just hold Shift, and you can see how that continues from my last selection point. So in this case, this doesn't really work, but what we can do is we can just select down here. And then if we hold shift, you can see how it allows us to basically draw where we want this cut or this seam to go. So I'm going to just place it there, and that gives us the same result. So shift, it allows you to kind of paint your selection in a sense along an actual edge loop. So from here, we've got that set up. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit C for cut. That's going to instantly cut that piece, and now we need to unfold it. So we can go into our island selection tool, and you can see now, if I select the island, we have two separate islands now. So we're going to take this one. We're going to take our transform tool, which this is the only thing that I find a little bit odd about Rizom, is the transform tool is just a little basic. We're going to just kind of move this up here. You also don't have to really move it around. I find a lot of the stuff that I end up doing, I don't really move my islands around all that much. But we'll take that, and we're going to unfold. So we'll hit U to unfold, and then we'll hit P to lay out. And it's going to automatically lay it out for us. We can see that we've got that now, but you can also see that we now have our checker pattern. So our custom checker pattern that we imported is now being shown on the object because we've laid it out. If you end up saving this and then re-importing it later on because there's already some islands created, it's going to actually show you the checker pattern on the entire object. But for your initial load of a project, it's not going to. Okay, so what we'll do is we're going to do the same thing on this other object. We're going to just go to our edge selection mode, and now I'm going to show you how to use the shift tool. So you hold shift, you can see how you can just paint across. And I'm not clicking anything else, I'm just kind of dragging. And then we will just go ahead and go over here and drag it, and then we're good. And then we'll just do our regular selection for these edges. So we'll just double click. And then sometimes if you know that you have a termination here in the corner, you can just double click the entire edge and it'll just complete. But in cases like this, it won't work out very well. So, and this is just because this is kind of a crappy model. I just threw this together for the purpose of this tutorial. We'll do a more in-depth tutorial with more complex shapes later on. But we'll go ahead and cut that with C. So another super useful tool is, say you've already taken this and you have unwrapped it and you've laid it out. You can now select both of these, hit P, and it's going to evenly lay them out as best as it can, and we're good there. But what if we don't want to see those anymore? Well, you can click the island below and you hit I to isolate. That's going to isolate everything that you had selected, and it's going to hide everything else. Then you can just hit isolate again and you can hop out of it. The other thing you can do is you can hide objects as you go. That'll be something we do in a later tutorial where we actually work with something a little bit more dense, a little bit more complex, just because there are a lot more tools inside of Rizom that allow you to work with really heavy models that have a lot of pieces. And if you want to see an example of that, watch the live streams with my Xenomorph. But they allow you to work with really dense projects and manage them really efficiently. That way you don't have to worry about, did I unwrap this? Have I set this up in its own group? Have I labeled this? There's tons of management tools within Rizom. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to just look at how else we want to cut this apart. One nice thing about Rizom is once we establish how we're going to cut something, we can just go ahead and just start running through it. So the first thing I want to look at is this kind of underneath ledge here, and we want to select one of these that routes through it. So you can see if we double click that, it's just not gonna, it's gonna go through the model, but we want to isolate this area. So what we're going to do is we're going to select these corner pieces here, and then we'll double click in the center there, and we'll go to the side over here, do the same thing, select the corner piece, double click, and then you can double click that, and we can double click. Oop. I didn't do that one. And I think I might have selected the wrong thing. We can double click that, and that should go all the way through. We might have, yeah, we did. So this presents another issue, is how do you unselect? Because we're used to unselecting with control. Rizom's a little bit different. So what you can do is you can hold Control Shift, double click, and it'll select that last loop. And then we have our interior loop here that we want. So we just need to go ahead and cut this so it flattens out. So what we'll do is we'll just select that corner joint, select this corner joint. You can see those don't continue all the way through because it splits off because of the way that this was subdivided. So we'll just go ahead and finish it off real quick. And this is by no means a perfect unwrap. This is also not a perfect object, but this gives you an idea on how to use this tool to unwrap your models. Okay, so we got that. So we'll hit C to cut. We'll go to island mode, and then we'll lay it out. So do you have to lay out while you're doing this every single time? No, you can actually cut this entire object up, and then you can lay it out. And it kind of shows the power of like Rizom's UV packing. So we'll go ahead and we'll just cut the rest of this up, and then we'll go from there. So I want to cut this top piece off. So what we're going to do is we will just click along this line down at the bottom here. Double click that one. And double click that one. Rizom is really good at predicting where your edge loops need to go and stop. And most of the time you don't have to do a lot of manual workflow on it. So we'll go ahead and click that corner and this corner. And then we want it to stop up here. So we know we have a little stop right there. And then we have one over here as well. So with those all selected, we can just go ahead and cut that. We know the seams are good there. And then I'm going to cut this bottom off because I already know that's just going to be a flat face, so we don't really need to care about. So we'll just control click, and control click. And then again, you can also use your shift click. This is one of those situations where that comes in handy because we can just drag there, and we can stop here, and we can just kind of drag through. And then we can continue doing that. So it's really fast for actually going through and selecting things. All right, so good there. That should be everything selected. So we'll cut the bottom off. So the bottom's now cut. We got to worry about this little interior portion here. So this is the same kind of unwrap. We're just going to grab this interior face. We're going to double click that corner loop. Same thing over here because we know those terminate on the inside there. And that one doesn't. It's actually this one up here. So we'll just go and do that. And then we'll just click this one. All right, so that's the interior of that. We'll hit cut. So from here, we're pretty cut up. We know that this is going to unfold pretty well. This interior portion, or this kind of center portion, is going to be a bit of a mess, but we're going to look at Rizom in the 2D view here to establish what we can do for that. So what we'll do is we'll select all of the islands, and we're going to do an unwrap. Rizom's going to unwrap it, and then we have our main island here, which we can then just kind of pull out to the side, and we can work on it. And we're going to take this mess here, we're going to go ahead and lay it out. So we're looking at this, and it looks like we went a little crazy with the cutting. Seems like what happened is we cut this from its main portion. So I don't really want that sitting like that. I want it to be as straight as possible. So what we can do, we can select our actual edge loop, and we can say, okay, so that fits right there. That doesn't go anywhere, but that fits right there. So we'll take that one. I'm gonna do the same thing here. This one, should also pop to there. We're gonna take that selection and we're gonna weld it. You can also weld using the hotkey W. So you can see now it's welded those two edges together, and we can select that island, and we will just unfold it again. That straightens it out really nicely, and then we can lay it out, and we have a much better result there. That's more what I was going for. Okay, so now we have this big ugly thing. So in the 2D view, just like Maya or any other UV unwrapping program, you can still see everything kind of laid out in a way that, you know, makes somewhat logical sense. So we need to establish how we want to cut this apart. So I know that there's a lot of strain right here, and you can see your distortion down at the bottom here. This is your distortion graph. So it's going to show you you have a higher end distortion in the red or a higher end in the blue. You want to be in this gray area, this neutral area. This is where we want to sit. So what we're going to do is we're going to just select this edge. That should travel all the way through. Always make sure it does. Go into selection mode to hide that little transform box. I'm going to do the same thing over here. And we will cut that. And then again, we can just unwrap unfold, and then we can see what kind of result we're getting there. So we're still getting a lot of distortion here. So ideally we need to have a seam on this corner. Problem is if we cut through this corner, we're actually going to cut this chunk off. So I'm going to try to take this corner over here, or this little ledge just outside that corner, and we're going to cut there and see if that relieves enough tension. So if we add that cut there, select it, go to unwrap, we can see we're starting to get a much better result here. And then we're going to continue this process. I'm going to go up here and we're going to select one of these edges. Just make sure that travels all the way through. And we'll go ahead and apply a cut there. And we're just going to keep just working through this. And you can do this in 3D view, you can do this in 2D view. It really doesn't matter how you want to do it. So we do have distortion down here. And that's because this is being pulled in a way, and Rizom is trying to unwrap it in a way that doesn't distort it too much. So we need to cut this somehow. So what we're going to do is we're going to select through right here. And then that gets us to the edge. So that's going to cut this thing off. We don't want that. So I'm going to Control Select or Control Shift, select those. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So we want to cut it there. Cut through. Okay. All right, perfect. So we'll Shift Control, and then we'll cut this, and then go ahead and go back to your island and unfold. That should give us a much kind of better result. Still getting a little bit of distortion, but what we can do is we can hit that. We can optimize it. Lay it out. We want to kind of get everything laid out here. And this is still looking kind of crummy. So at this point, looking at this, honestly, it's probably going to be best to just go backwards. And this is where having both views available to you is really important. So we can tell that didn't work out. So what we want is we're going to cut this edge. So we're going to continue this edge through here, and this should stop. Or we want this one right here. We want it to stop there. So we don't want that much distortion through there. So we're going to go ahead and cut this off. That should stop right along that edge, but it's kind of gets a little messed up here. So we'll just kind of help it and carry it through. And hit cut. Now let's try laying that out. Oops. We want to select the entire shell, unfold. So they gave us a really good straight result down here at the bottom, but it kind of trashed the top of that. So we're not going to do that. So we want to find a way to do this without actually cutting this off. And so I think the best way is going to be that same cut. But what we're going to do is we're going to back off a little bit. Just make sure that we don't have that. And we're going to Control Select just enough to leave some support behind, because otherwise the model is collapsing, because it's just going to try to unfold it in the best way it knows possible. So we'll go here, unfold, unwrap, unwrap, and we missed something, so we'll just go through. I don't think we missed anything over here, did we? We did. Okay, so hold on, cut. This is just kind of where it comes down to troubleshooting with Rizom. Unfold. So we have that unfolded, but we're still pinched up here somehow. So where are we pinched? So right here. Cut that. And unfold. Why are we still being pinched? Oh. Again, if this was a better model, it would probably be a lot easier to do. But you can see how that gave us a much better result. There's much less distortion, and we have a lot less flex. So what we're going to do, we'll go ahead and just lay all this out. Just do an unwrap just in case. Lay it all out. Okay, so we've got this kind of laid out. It's looking pretty good. We do have some blue distortion up here that we'd like to kind of refrain from having. I want to establish where that's happening though. So the only way that I can see that I really want to do this is if I re-weld this and then I cut it from here. So sometimes it's a lot easier just to go through and kind of figure out what's happening and figure out where you can actually solve issues instead of just trying to cut until you have something that works. So what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna just cut these pieces off, because that'll give us the best way to tell where we need to re-weld everything together. So, and this kind of shows another area that we had down here that's causing a massive pinch and a lot of distortion. We don't want that. So let's go ahead and cut those off. And then we can unfold this main island again. We can see we get a much straighter result out of that. And then what we want is we're going to select this. Rizom automatically shows us where that's going to re-weld to. And then we can just hit weld or W. We can take this messy object and then unfold it once more. We have a much better result. Lay it out. And then we'll just select the whole thing and lay it out. Okay, cool. So looking at this one, we have another kind of just ugly unwrap here. So we'll just go ahead and go through here and clean this up real quick. All right, so looking at this, we have a lot of distortion here. And it's kind of the only way to fix that is gonna be just to cut it out. So we're gonna go ahead and just select that loop right there. Same thing over here. This will just relieve that tension. It's going to give us seams, but they're manageable ones. So let's go ahead and select everything there. We will unwrap, lay out. Okay, that gives us a much cleaner result. Everything's flat. It got rid of most of that distortion. All right, so that's some of the basic features of Rizom. That's kind of how you can navigate, you can move around, you can accomplish what you need to do. So that's it for this tutorial. That's a good overview of how Rizom is used to unwrap and cut and kind of move things around. And it gets you used to the interface as well as working with it. Now, in future tutorials, we're going to go over things like pinning your UV islands, straightening out the UV islands, things like calculating your texel density, setting up UDIMs, everything that we can kind of cover in the next couple of videos. I wanted this one to be a little bit less of a technical video and more of a just kind of getting started so you can get in there and start working. But we'll release more as we go. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you guys did, please make sure you give it a thumbs up and make sure you follow. If you'd like to, you can still support me on Patreon, or the link is in my description below. And with that said, I will see you all in the next video.